Hello, everybody. My name is Fern Lazar, and I lead the Finn Partners Health Practice. And today I'm delighted to be with you because we have with us an international panel of experts to talk about the kickoff meeting of the year for 2025, the annual JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. We know that JP Morgan Healthcare Conference started out as Hambrick and Quist way back in the 90s, and I have been fortunate enough to have attended about 28 of these meetings. Originally, it was a meeting that was important for burgeoning biotech companies only, but over the years, it has grown into an ecosystem of business development meetings, media meetings, gatherings of colleagues, reunions of physicians and old colleagues from previous companies, as well as the banking community getting together to find out what the companies are saying for the new year to set the stage for new milestones and capital raising activities. So with that, we're delighted to kick this off, and I would like to introduce my panelists today. We have David Carey, who leads the Finn Partners Investor Relations Group, Julie Adrian, who leads Finn Partners UK practice, Ellie Hanson, who is here with us from Israel to talk about what this means for Israeli companies, and Aman Gupta, who leads our healthcare practice in Asia. So with that, I'm going to start out with the first question for our international panelists, which is, in spite of, now we know that 14,000 people come to San Francisco, which is definitely their biggest gathering of the year, to meet and greet and to make waves and to reunite with colleagues and friends, and to also tell the business community about why this year is going to be a critical year for them. So what makes this a critical event for international companies as well? So I'm going to start out with Julie, if you would take that.
Yeah, thanks, Fern. It's very much about what you said. It's somewhat of a melting pot of countries and investors and bankers and connections. So it's about listening and learning at the conference for these companies that are, looking to break into the US, but also very much focused on global. And what we find from the UK companies is that, whilst it might not be a place of primary source of funding or landing those deals, it is absolutely about testing the story, checking it for relevance in the US market and the global markets, and then really bringing those learnings home and figuring out, where it takes their story and where they should focus locally.
Thanks. Ellie, would you answer that as well? Thank you.
Yeah, I want to build on what Julie said, and it's exciting because every year we see more and more Israeli companies attending JPM, and it's hard to stand out there, but as it makes sense, these innovators are not targeting the Israeli market. They need to bring their solutions to the US, to Europe, abroad. So having a platform like JPM and events like JPM are so important to build those connections, build those partnerships, because that's ultimately what's going to help them be successful.
Thank you, Ellie. Aman, over to you.
So Fun, I think it's kind of very interesting how the JP Morgan is evolving as a kind of a start of the year kind of a thing. And as of right now, I know 3 of my clients are going to be present there. So there are kind of 2 things which really stands out for them. So one, it is used as a global networking hub. So they are able to meet the people who could be potential clients. It could be the people who could be the potential partners and collaborators. The second is it's also the place for visibility and validation. If you are at JP Morgan, means you are one of the global players. So people would like to be seen in that particular place for that kind of a validation. And somehow that is becoming, as you said, is the melting pot of the global ecosystem, that I need to be present there to be kind of that I am around in this health global ecosystem and I matter.
And in an odd way, guys, right? You can kind of almost stand out in such a crowded market as an international company in JP Morgan if you go about it the right way. right? I mean, in a way. So it's kind of a little bit of an oxymoron, but I think that's a really interesting point because there are not a tremendous amount of companies that go from these other regions.
I
Exactly.
would also add that it's just access to capital, right? Because for a lot of international companies, they can get their start in, let's say, Israel with some initial funding.
Yes.
But really the US, there are so many, the level of and the deep knowledge of healthcare investors, biotech investors, medtech investors in the US is so great. And just the funds to take these companies then to the next level.
That's a really good point, David. And so that brings me to my next point, which is we've heard how important the meeting is, and it's less than a month away. So what does a company do if they plan to be in San Francisco, JPM, booked their room, got their plane tickets, but they actually haven't started planning it? What can they do now? David?
All right. Well, so I would say that these companies, you're not alone. Most companies this time of year, they're having their year-end board meetings. So that takes up a lot of executive time, and companies are also planning for 2025. So thoughts about JP Morgan beyond, oh yeah, I'm going in a month. Beyond that, sometimes companies just forget. So I wanted to share just a few tactical things that you should do right now. So first of all, just if you're a first timer, you need to determine what your priorities are from the meeting. If you've been to JP Morgan for several years in the past, every JP Morgan can be a little bit different. So if you're a public company, obviously meeting with investors is a priority for you. And there is also that BD component for both public and private companies. For private companies, it could be just general awareness building of your company if you've never been there before, and maybe you want to do some business development activities. So maybe you want to sell your company, maybe you want to acquire a company or a business line or raise some funds. So really think of what your priority is and go from there. Post on social media. Do that today. Tell everybody in your network that you're going to be going to JP Morgan so that you can, get a little bit of noise and maybe get some inbound requests to meet with you. Put it on LinkedIn and use the hashtag JPM2025, and hopefully you'll get some more eyes. Reach out to your network on LinkedIn. Most of us, that is the platform for connecting with people. So reach out to as many people as you can and try to schedule some meetings. Also, if you're on X and Blue Sky, let people know that you're going to be out at the conference. Another important item is to make sure that your investor deck is up to date. Does the corporate story that's in your deck reflect where you as a company want to be in 2025? Also during the meeting, there are lots and lots of social events going on. So there are cocktail parties, there are lots of networking events, there are other satellite events that are going on aside from just the JP Morgan meeting and just aside from one-on-one meetings. So, figure out which of those you want to attend and then, make sure that you pace yourself as you go along because it's a very long meeting from basically 6 a.m. until 10 p.m. So don't overdo it. And then I'd say, JP Morgan, as Fern mentioned, it's an important meeting, but it's one meeting of many as you think about your investor relations strategy for 2025. So there are a lot of other healthcare investor relations conferences that take place throughout the year. And especially for international companies, come to the US, we're seeing more people doing events in person now that the pandemic is like 5 years beyond. But if you're coming to the US, schedule some meetings with the financial committee, consider attending one of these other investor conferences, and then also maybe meet with KOLs and some of your customers as well in the US to make that trip more efficient.
Great. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that because certainly we want to give some counsel to our international folks out there who, again, may not have started, but definitely want to leverage the JP Morgan meeting to build partnerships with not only US organizations, but other international organizations, investors and startups. So Julie, I think you have something to say?
Yeah, I think the biotech showcase is a great forum. Some international companies don't understand that there's kind of a parallel event that goes on at the same time that you can get access to. You still pay for that, but you can get access to, and they have a partnering system. So you can sign up for that still today and get engaged in the partnering system and set up meetings and attend panels and discussions and have the networking conversations. So that whilst most people, well, unless you bank with JP Morgan or you're invited as a special guest, you cannot get into the actual conference. Some people don't know that. We just had a client ask us that the other day. So just to say, most of you probably know, but just in case. But the Biotech Showcase I've attended that for many, many years, and it's equally fruitful and helpful and lots of connections. And you get a sense of what's going on in the actual conference by being at that one as well. So I'd strongly recommend that.
And maybe
Ellie?
I can add just a couple of tips. And you guys, wow, you packed a lot of tips in that, which I think are really valuable. But maybe a couple of points for some of the smaller startups too. Really reach out to your network. David, said LinkedIn and social media. There's so much that can be done there. But tap your board members, tap your existing investors. Speak to even to your service providers and see, can they help you with any connections? Really make sure that you're making the most that you can of that moment. And I think also as a smaller startup, again, we know that time is limited and there's a lot of competition. So set realistic expectations. So if this is your first time going to the event, have that goal, whether it's 5 meetings, 6, whatever it is. Do a great job at those meetings and aim to do better next year. But make sure that those expectations are in line with where you are as a company.
That's a really good point, Ellie, because first timers sometimes, it can be difficult to kind of get in the mix. So you need to be flexible. You need to realize that people that you meet at networking events can be really valuable. And start slow. And I've got to say, for some companies that we're working with, some publicly traded companies, we actually have combination of investor meetings and BD meetings, 60 plus meetings already. So some of these companies are just really jamming on, making meetings.
3 dinners a night, right? That's what
Yeah.
it's like, 3 dinners and cocktails. And
Aman, I don't know if you wanted to tag along there or say anything. No, the Indian market's very hot right now, so.
No, I just want to sort of add, because I think, one of our clients, and I know the team is talking to the Fern team in the US, has kind of taken a kind of a leap of faith. And, for them, JP Morgan is kind of the way to look at how they can collaborate in the US market. They've been present. So they already are having their own kind of the side event. They're investing into that kind of creating their own event, using that as a platform to bring in the right kind of people to come and talk to them. And I think this is something which, depending on which market are we talking about, we'll see more and more happening. What's happening, the way we understand is that JP Morgan is not like an event. It's a festival. It's a festival of health ecosystem. And when a festival is happening, you need to find how do you position yourself. It's not just about what's the core event is. The people who are the first timer, they say, can I be in center stage? Can I be in the main hall? And that we know is not possible if you're not a JP Morgan client. It has to be coming from JP Morgan. But what it is the kind of a place where some of the key healthcare players are coming in. These are the people who will define what 2025 and the beyond would look like. Use the opportunity to look at the trends, but also look at the way, what does your pitch look like right now? What are you really looking to come out of this particular conversation? And then invest accordingly. It could be, as one of my clients is doing currently, that we're going to create our own event. We're going to look at this as a way to collaborate with the US ecosystem, because we have products which could be useful for the US market, but also this could be a kind of a plan for us to move into the other markets in the world. So the opportunity is immense, and we could really leverage it through a different way. What I think is, I have seen that there's a lot of, how do you say, assumptions which people have. So what they really need is people who know the kind of what JP Morgan stands for. What are the how you navigate this ecosystem. So having a right partner and a collaborator who knows the system and can help you navigate is really a critical key to the success on how can you leverage this thing.
Thank you. Thank you all. Those were really important points. And I know we have here on our panel experts in investor relations, but also in communications as well. And I think for those companies that are not at JP Morgan, there is a way to leverage all of the immense amount of content that comes out there, the trends, the forecasting, the hot list of things to look out for in 2025. Maybe we'll just do a round robin around our panel to talk about how companies, even if you're not at JP Morgan, how you can take some of those insights and trends and use them to your advantage throughout the year. Let's start with Julie.
Oh, yeah, great. And I want to also pick up on something Aman said, these this trend of fringe events in and around these key events are absolutely things that people should take, and fringe content, right? And using that to get more close encounters with people that aren't the big behemoth, but getting closer to your investors and customers and shareholders, I think is important. And so that's what I would suggest, is take advantage of, the regional events that are happening in the market. Leverage trends that come out of JP Morgan, look at the media, look at what's being posted by people there, key off on that, repost that content, connect it to your innovation and your tech and your company and where you're going. Make those parallels so that people see you're on the front lines of engaging and listening to what's going on and what's contemporary and coming out of the meeting, and then connect it to you, and then share that out so that others can see you're part of the conversation. It's almost like you were there, right? I mean, in this virtual world, it can basically be like that. And then I think there's a whole host, especially so in the UK, there's a tremendous amount of meetings, regional kind of meetings. You can do a click down in the first quarter and the second quarter, where you can then take those learnings and really raise the platform in what we're liking to call these close conferences that are smaller and more intimate, and where you can really establish even deeper connections. Not that you can't do that at JP Morgan, but it's just a bigger scale. And I think then bringing that home and doing it locally is really important.
Aman?
Well, I think I'm going to extend to what Julie said. I will call it like a trend forecasting. How do you forecast the kind of trends which would define the health ecosystem in 2025, and use it for multiple advantages. You can use it as a thought leader, that this is what I heard, and therefore this is how it could look like. That's kind of the comms part of it. But also you can use it for your business alignment, looking at what are the opportunities which are coming in 2025 and beyond, and do I have an alignment on what am I offering, and therefore I could sort of use that as a way for our business growth part of it. I think as David said, a lot of clients are looking for, can I collaborate with the possible people, but also this is the place for looking at an M&A. Are there possible merger and acquisitions opportunities which are there? Also looking at what are the focus areas which are coming in. Is it precision medicine? Is it AI? Is it kind of a telehealth? Especially for outside of the US, we see a lot of health innovations happening, but that's happening in a kind of a geographical silos. Is any of my innovation could be possibly the next big one for the global scale? It could be a validation of what you're doing and extending it on global scale per se. So in this way, it's almost like a place where I could really define what does my future looks like, what does my business future look like in multiple aspects of it.
Yeah, I love what you just said, Aman, which is taking some of the insights and the forecasts that are coming out, and then repurposing them to showcase your strengths and your focus of your business. So I think that's an easy tactic. And we know that on the main stage, all the major pharma companies, biopharma companies, are talking about what they're looking for in 2025. And so that's kind of like a key marquee of what you should be trying to sell to them to reorient maybe your conversations. Ellie, did you also want to comment on that?
I think you guys covered it, but listen and be open-minded. I think I see too often early innovators who think their technology and the way that they're describing it is the most unique and greatest, and everyone's going to get it. But if you're speaking a different language in the whole industry, it's just not going to go anywhere. So listen, adjust your messaging throughout all of your materials, social media, news releases, collateral, and make sure that what you're offering is needed and wanted and that you're filling a real need in the market. So kind of
David,
what all you said.
Right.
oh, sorry, yeah, so that's great. Yeah, thank you, Ellie. Very important points about trying to use language that's easily understood and compatible with what investors and strategics are looking for. David, did you want to add to that?
I'll just say, right now at this time of the year, a lot of the banks are coming out with their predictions for the market for medtech and for biotech in 2025. And they're also coming up with some of their own questions. And I wanted to actually just share a few from an RBC note that came out yesterday about some of the questions for biotech that they have in 2025. So again, these are some of the threads that we will see in just a few weeks at JP Morgan of what people are talking about. So some of the things that they've identified, and these are not necessarily specific to biotech, but will the new US healthcare leadership be truly disruptive or ultimately maintain more the status quo in 2025 and beyond? A second area that they identified is the one and done genetic therapies, and can they show durable revenue streams and recapture investors' imagination? Another one is related to the GLP-1s. And is there any large indication that the GLP-1s won't work in? AI and machine learning is another big area which continues. Last year, there was a lot of talk about AI, and that will continue into this year. And whether AI can really have an impact on drug development success rates. One other area that they're looking at is psychedelics. And is there a perceived future mental health treatment option by using psychedelics? And then finally, they're looking at whether biopharma acquisitions will come back in 2025. And a lot of the big biopharma companies and pharma companies are sitting on a lot of cash right now, and they also have patent cliffs. So I think that M&A activity will begin. It's always a matter of when that's going to happen. If it's going to happen surrounding JP Morgan, or if it's going to happen perhaps later on in the year.
Yeah.
Right, and I've heard the same for medtech as well. Many of the strategics are sitting on mounds of cash and are unwilling to take the development risk. So we're looking for companies with proven technologies.
Yeah. Waiting longer and looking for like direct paths to revenue, right? Like closer, how quick can they get to revenue?
So I just want to turn a little bit to maybe looking at some of the local markets and what maybe what trends you're seeing locally in the UK and India and in Israel that also pave the way for companies to have successful JP Morgan in 2025. Ellie, let's start with you.
Sure. So it's been a very difficult year, as everyone knows, for Israel with the multi-front war, with economic challenges. But despite that, Israeli companies and Israeli founders are very resilient. So it's really, again, important to take advantage of platforms like JPM and other events and marketing plans in general, but to make sure that you're connecting with the investors and partners and continuing to show how you can continue to deliver even despite all of these challenges. So, we're seeing a lot of resilience, and hopefully 2025 will be a better year.
Thank you, Ellie. Aman?
I think from an India perspective, it's a huge opportunity in multiple levels. So one is the focus of the Indian government on health. We have the whole digital health ecosystem being created in India right now, which is of an interest to any health tech company. How do you collaborate with the Indian, government per se? We have an in-house startup healthcare, a health tech ecosystem, which is gaining a lot of global traction. We see these people sort of looking at the JP Morgan and similar conferences as kind of a platform to showcase their innovations. And I can tell you one thing, the health tech ecosystem in India is really, really going to change the way how global healthcare delivery is going to happen in the future. You also have the Indian pharma and the medtech ecosystem. So as we all know, Indian is seen as the pharmacy of the world. You have a very strong, Indian manufacturing, which are looking at an off-patent, molecules, and including biosimilars now. So that is something which you will see a more and more happening, where some of the developed economies are going to look at how can they really collaborate with the Indian pharma ecosystem to ensure that access to the safe and efficacious medicines and biosimilars are kind of happening. So it's going to be a very right collaboration system as the patent cliff happens. How do you ensure that you still get access to the safe and efficacious drugs and biosimilars? So it's going to be a very, very interesting space for Indian medtech and pharma ecosystem, see how they can really be the part of the global supply chain, be the part of the global healthcare ecosystem. So I would sort of say platforms like this is what they're looking to showcase what they bring onto the table, build the trust and the reputation in the global stage, that they're part of the health ecosystem and not somebody who is at the periphery. And I think that is where the future lies.
Thank you, Aman. Julie?
So, I think in the UK, and don't let the accent fool you, I'm based in the UK and very much focused on this region. It's absolutely about the post-Brexit regulatory environment and what does that look like, and how is the UK staying relevant and staying at the front lines, kind of what Aman said about India and Asia. How are we staying on the front line of innovation as a country and as a region? There are a number of new programs in the UK, as those of you who are here know, the ILAP program, the Early Access to Medicines program. There's a number of schemes that are absolutely built to accelerate, and even in some cases, we can get clinical trials going sooner in the UK than we can in Europe overall, because we are now not in the European Union. So there's a number of advantages that UK companies can leverage, and in fact, we're seeing a lot of our US clients picking the UK as first country often, sometimes by choice, sometimes not by choice. It just happens that way. But there's a way to leverage that from a UK standpoint. So, certainly the other trends we've talked about globally with AI and all of that. But I just think the opportunities are tremendous, especially with the Golden Triangle here between Cambridge and Oxford and London. There's so much innovation. It's such a, again, back to this close system of connecting and networking. It's an amazing place to make those connections and partners and really accelerate your innovation.
Very exciting. 2025 is going to be a very exciting year all around the world. I see that we do have a question that came in through the chat, and it's from Tal Orr from Atlasense Biomed. And Tal wants to know, your technology sounds very exciting, the first wearable delivering an ICU level remote monitoring with earliest warning of various life-threatening events and conditions before they escalate. Very cool.
Yeah.
It's going to be my first time to visit JPM, and I still don't know how to technically make contact with relevant medtech early stage investors before the event to schedule a one-on-one meetings. Any advice would be appreciated. I think maybe David will have you respond to that.
Well, that is a great question, and it can be also challenging. So what we find at the JP Morgan conference throughout the years is, yes, there are a lot of investors that are going to JP Morgan, but the meeting tends to be a little bit less about new opportunities. But having said that, don't freak out, because there are lots of other ways to engage with people. Use your social media network. On LinkedIn, there are groups related to medical innovation, and they should be talking about going to JP Morgan. There are also conferences, as Julie mentioned, there's the Biotech Showcase. Even though it says biotech, there are medical device, medical technology companies that attend that. So hanging out in at that conference would be beneficial. There's also a conference called Resi, and they also focus on earlier innovation companies. So that would be a really good place. I believe that's at the Marines Memorial Club. You could check online for that. It's RESI. And that would be another great place where some investors who are more focused on very early stage companies would go. And then also at some of the cocktail parties and some of the events, you'll see a lot of those people also circulating around in the evening to some of these, and just be a prolific networker and meet as many people as you can. Tell them about what your company's doing, your type of product, and maybe they also know people that they can connect you with.
And there are a few MedTech women events that have been advertised online that you can attend, and that are really well organized around strategics and also investors. But the other secret of getting to MedTech CFOs and investors are MedTech analysts, and a lot of them are coming, well, most of them, all of them go to JP Morgan to San Francisco. They set up their own hotel accommodations and rooms and meeting rooms, and they meet with as many companies as possible because it's their opportunity also to refresh their thinking on what is out there and what's new. And so oftentimes they, this is probably the time of year, especially the ones that are not with JP Morgan, where they might have time to actually meet with you and learn about your technology. And they often like to give pointers on where to focus your story and who you might want to talk to, because they're talking to the CFOs of the Medtronics and the Siemens and the all the rest of the Strikers of the world. So that's a big layup if you can start now. And we could definitely chat with you offline, Tal, about some other ideas. Julie, did you want to add something?
Just real quick, I wanted to add, David, I wanted to key in on the RESI, because that's another one of these close conferences that also then travels. There's a local Resi in the first half here in the UK that you could, getting connected into some of these conference systems and platforms and then following them. There's another amazing networking platform that's relatively new in the UK called Connexen, CONEXEN, that is one of these close conferences where it's in London and Cambridge and Oxford. And when you go, there's very senior people. There's a mix of investors, analysts, partners, strategics, connecting in and starting to get deep into some of those platforms in your local markets. Often those go to the bigger meetings, and you can go with them to the bigger meetings. MedTech World is another one. They're a smaller conference that is here and goes around the world. They're going to be at JP Morgan. So starting to make some of those connections and deepen those connections with these closer, smaller conference providers and supporters, and just it really opens up more options for you when you then even go to the bigger meetings.
If I can also add, sorry, just one more thing for Tal, since she's in my market here. Tal, I'm sure you know that there are various Israeli delegations and events happening all around the conference show floor. So I think it's important to evaluate what those opportunities can offer versus some of these other more specialized ones. There are so many off-site events happening. So really understanding what each of them are offering and what is the best fit for you, given the goal you want to achieve right now.
Perfect.
I just want to say one other conference that could be beneficial is the AdvaMed conference, which takes place in, I think it's October. And AdvaMed is the trade association for medical technology, medical device, and they actually have an early stage track as part of that meeting, and it's kind of under the radar. There are a lot of people go to that, a lot of companies, but there are also some earlier stage investors who are looking for opportunities. So I'm not sure where that is going to be in 2025, but that would be another one that's worth checking out.
Great idea. I was thinking along the same lines. So
I think AdvaMed will be at JP Morgan, so they have some space there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's the medical device, MDMA is there too. So yeah, I would, all of those entities can help connect you with some of the investors and other strategics as well. So I think we're kind of at our, I think our time limit here. We didn't want to go over, but let's do a fast lightning round because in closing, what's the one word or phrase that comes to mind when you think about JP Morgan's value to international companies? David, let's start with you.
I would say unparalleled access to global healthcare leaders.
How about you, Aman?
Strategic visibility.
Julie?
Listen and learn.
Excellent. And Ellie?
Ecosystem connections.
Fantastic. I want to thank all of my panelists today for what was a very scintillating discussion about the opportunities at JP Morgan and how to make them last throughout the year, because it's not just one and done, everyone, right? It's this is the investment you make at this meeting. You have to extend it and take those the seeds you plant throughout the year in your communications and through your investor meetings and through your presentations. So thank you all for joining us here today. And hopefully we'll see some of you at the meeting in San Francisco in 2025. To all of you, have a wonderful holiday season, and thank you again.